Hi. Okay, we're going to talk about a language experience approach lesson. And this is something that you would definitely do with preschool students and possibly early kindergarten, depending on the performance level of your group of students. You could maybe even do it once at the beginning of the school year for first grade, but that would probably be it. The whole point of the language experience approach, or also called LEA lesson, is that you are trying to show kids it's a beginning writing activity where you're showing them that the words they say out loud can be written down. Okay, that's the whole point, is that they're understanding that the words that are spoken can be written down on paper. And that's really important for them to know as a precursor to being able to do more difficult writing. Okay, so you start by having a common experience that all of your students can talk about. So if you went on a field trip to the farm and you come back, you could do one of these. If you went outside of the playground, then you come in, you could talk about these. Like, it has to be a common experience that everyone has. So our sentence that we're going to use this time is I like to play. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write it onto my chart paper. And I'm doing this the best I can here, so let me move my video. Okay, so I talk about how I like to start with a blank piece of paper because when kids sit down at their desk with their writing paper, it's blank. And so if I went ahead and filled this all out, then it would be like that doesn't look like what they see when they sit down. And so instead, I'm going to start with blank paper and I'm going to model my way through writing. All right, so I start by saying I like to play, and then I'm going to say Scrabble. So I write in Scrabble. Now, I said this sentence. This is my sentence. So I'm going to label this sentence Dr. Beam. And then I go on to the next student in my class. Okay? So I call on someone else and I say, what do you like to play? And so they might say, I like to play soccer. So then I'm going to write that sentence again. I like to play soccer. And let's say that Joe said this, so I'm going to write Joe's name in here. And you cannot see that color. So then I'm going to go on to the next student, and he says, I like to play trains. So I write that. I like to play trains. And we're going to say that Chris said that. And so I go all the way through my class until I have done everyone. And I always do it like this because I want them to see that this was their own thing they said and I wrote it down. Okay, that's the important piece. So this whole LEA lesson is something you would work on throughout the whole week. So this part of the activity would probably just be on the first day. I like to always do it on chart paper because of what's going to come next. So I typically don't do this on a smart board or something like that. So you come back the next day and you review. And as you're writing, of course, you're modeling and talking about things like capital I, finger spacing, period, all of that important things that we keep in mind about writing. So the next day we come back and we read these together as a class, and then I'm going to physically cut these apart and let the kids have them. That way they're like holding their sentence and they can walk around, they can read it to each other. It's their sentence. The next step after that is to cut that sentence apart. So here's one that I had from earlier. When I said I like to play Scrabble, and I would have these in little baggies already cut up for them, and the kids would come in and it's like a puzzle. They have to rebuild their sentence. And again, remind them of clue things like where's the period, where does the I go, and those kinds of things. Then to take it a step farther, I have them put it back in a bag, and I have them switch with a friend, and they rebuild with the friend their sentence. Okay? All right. And then the next step, if your students are ready for it, is to let them build their sentence in front of them and then give them a sentence strip and try to see if they can write and copy down their sentence the way that you've written it. And again, we're talking like preschool. So they may or may not be able to do this step, but definitely your kindergarten and first graders should be able to. So they would write, I like to play Scrabble, Dr. Beam, just like I have it written from up here. Okay, so again, by now we're talking like we're on Wednesday or Thursday because just the whole building of the sentence, sharing it with a friend, rebuilding it, the writing, those are all going to be very developmentally appropriate depending on how your kids are performing. Okay. Then the next step is they're going to fill out something like this. This is definitely a place to differentiate instruction. I already have it filled on here so you can remember. I already gave you some of these handouts. I like to play blank by blank. So in this case, if they needed to, all they have to do is fill in what they said they like to play and then their name. If you have students who can do the whole thing, you just put a line here and let them rewrite the whole sentence. So you differentiate it to whatever group of kids that you have. And then the final step for the LEA lesson is that you would give kids a blank piece of paper, and each kid would get a piece of paper. They would glue their sentence onto the paper, and then they would add an illustration of them doing whatever activity they had written and they had chosen. So the reason why this is also an important step is because I gather up all of the illustrated pages and I bind them together into a class book. And I put a title page on it, something like this, that goes with the sentence. We like to play by Mrs. Beam's first grade class. And then it has everybody's paper in there. And then I put that into like our book corner so the kids can pull that book out and read it at any time. Now, what's really important about this lesson is that, let's say I'm a student and I pull that book out and I start reading it and I realize that I can't read what it is that they like to play. They don't come find me as the teacher. They look at the kid's name on the paper and they go find that kid and say, Chris, what is it that you like to play? And Chris can tell him, I said I like to play trains. So the whole point is that the student that said the sentence is the expert on this particular sentence. And again, remember we're talking about like preschool kids. So therefore, it's a really important step because they're taking ownership of their words, ownership of written language, and that is really the focus here of the lesson. Okay, so again, this is called a language experience approach. So if you did this whole activity and you made it stretch out in your writing time for a whole week, and you did this a couple weeks in a row, you would quickly be adding books to your classroom that kids could read independently. And it's about the actual students in your class. Okay, so it's a pretty great activity. It's pretty common amongst our early learners. Thanks.